Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to go over the calculator skills useful for Chapter 8. This involves calculating critical value Z star, confidence interval for sample proportions, the critical value T star, and the confidence interval for sample means. Then we're going to also do this using either stats or data. So if you want to learn how to calculate the critical value Z star, unfortunately, there's no button for it. So you're going to have to find a different way to do it. You actually have to know the math behind it. So for 80% confidence, this means that the middle 80% of the normal distribution is covered. So let's draw that in. We're looking at this middle 80% right here. And that's the part that we want to capture inside our region. Unfortunately, the calculator always goes from left to right. So we have to figure out what percentage of the normal distribution goes from the left to the right there. We are assuming that's symmetric. So if the middle is 80%, we can assume that there's 10% on the left and 10% on the right. Altogether, that added to 100%. So going left to right, we know that it's going to be 90%. And that's the number we're going to put in our calculator using the inverse norm. So let's remember how we use the inverse norm feature. We're going to go to the home button. We want to use the calculator app. We're going to go to menu. We're going to go to statistics, distributions, and then inverse normal. Menu 653. This was a common button we used back in chapter 2. So for 80% confidence, you actually don't type in 0.80, you actually type in 0.90. And then we hit enter, and that's going to be our critical value Z star, 1.28155. Let's try this again because you do actually need to know the math. Let's try this with 90% confidence. That means we're looking at the middle 90% of the normal distribution. The 90% refers to this region right here. The calculator can only go from left to right. We have to type this percentage into the calculator. So what percentage is to the left and what percentage is to the right? It must be 5% and 5%. So in the calculator, we're going to tell it to go from left to right 95%. So let's type that in our calculator as well. Do you remember our shortcut commands? It was menu 653. So we're going to type that in, menu 653. That's inverse normal. And again, for 90% confidence, we don't type in 0.90, we type in 0.95. And there's our critical value, 1.64485. So let's apply this critical value to a problem we need to know. We used this previous example about kissing the right way, where we want to construct a 95% confidence interval for a sample proportion of 66.9% with a sample size of 124 people who kissed. All you really need is the original proportion, which is 83 out of 124, and the confidence interval, which was 95%. And then let's type this into our calculator. So you want to stay in the calculator app. We're going to go to menu. We're going to go down to statistics. We're going to go down to confidence intervals. And then we're constructing what we call a one sample Z interval for proportions. So we're going to look for something like that. That's going to be this one right here, one prop Z interval. And then notice it says success is X and an N. So if you remember our fraction, it was 83 out of 124. That means number of successes was 83 out of our sample size, which is 124, and our confidence level was 95%. By default, we'll always be at 95% on the calculator, so you're going to have to adjust accordingly. And then you get all this stuff. So this gives us most of the information we're going to need right here. It gives us our sample proportion right here of 0.669355. And it also gives us our margin of error, 0.082803. Here's our point estimate, and the next part is our margin of error. And then when you do the plus 0.082803, you'll get our upper bound, 0.752158. And if you subtract it, you'll get the other value, 0.586552. Remember, it's going to be important that you know how to show the work in my class as well. So I do expect you guys to also incorporate the critical value, which this doesn't give us. If you run the formula, it was p hat plus or minus the critical value times the square root of p hat 1 minus p hat over n. We know what p hat is, we know what n is, we don't know what the critical value z star is. So we're going to go back to our normal distribution. We know that the middle value is 95% right here. That means that we have 5% on the left and right all together. So 5% divided by 2, that's going to be 2.5% and 2.5%, which means in our calculator from left to right, we're going to have to type in 97.5%. Let's quickly go to our calculator and type in that critical value. What's our special command? Menu 653. For a 95% confidence interval, we're going to type in 97.5%. And there's our critical value, 1.95996. You can fill in the rest of the values according to the p hat and n that we already know. And there you go. That's all the skills you're going to need for one sample z-interval for proportions. You're also going to need to know how to find the critical value for t star, which is unfortunately also dependent on the sample size. We're going to start with a 95% confidence level with a sample size of n equals 10. So that means the middle is 95%. And that means there's 2.5% on the left and right. So from left to right, we're going to use 97.5%. Now notice that this is critical value t star. So no, we're not going to use menu 653 anymore. We're going to have to use an inverse t function instead. So let's go to our calculator. Again, we're looking for the inverse t, not inverse norm. We're going to go to menu. We're going to go down to statistics, distributions, and we're going to look for inverse t. And in the area, just like with inverse norm, we're going to type in 97.5% for a 95% confidence level. Here we have degree of freedom. Our sample size was 10. All you have to do is subtract 1, and minus 1 is our degree of freedom, which is 9. And here we go. We have our critical value t star of 2.26216. We could do this again with a sample size of 300. Remember, the degree of freedom is just the sample size minus 1. So this one would be 299. Let's type that into our calculator. We're going to go to Menu, Statistics, Distributions, Inverse T. We're going to use 0.975 for 95% confidence level. And this time, our degree of freedom is going to be 299 for our sample size of 300. So notice that we get a critical value of 1.96793, very close to the z-star critical value of 95% confidence level. Here's an old problem that we studied, and we're going to construct a confidence interval for sample means. So we're going to start off with our sample mean estimate of 10.2. The sample standard deviation was 4.2 hours. You're going to need the sample size of 250 students, and you're going to need a confidence level, 95% confidence level. So let's remember this, that we're constructing a one sample t-interval for sample means. You're always going to want to know which app to use. We're going to have to use the calculator app for this. So you go to the home button, and we're going to select the calculator app. We're going to select Menu, Statistics, Confidence Interval, and we're constructing a one sample t-interval for means. So there's nothing for sample means. You just have to know that this is what we call a t-interval. You have two options. You could either put in the data or stats. Data is an actual spreadsheet, and we don't have that. We just have the actual statistics. So we're going to put that in. Our sample mean was 10.2. Our sample standard deviation was 4.2. Our sample size was 250. And conveniently, our confidence level, we could just leave that as 95%. And we have all this information. So just like before, we have most of the information we need. We have our sample estimate of 10.2. So that would be 10.2 plus or minus our margin of error, which is right here, 0.523171. When you add or subtract that, we'll get our lower and upper bounds for our confidence interval. Again, this doesn't show us the work with the formula. Remember, our formula was this. It's our sample mean plus or minus our critical value times the standard deviation of the sample over the square root of n. So our sample mean, in this case, was 10.2. So the calculator doesn't give us t star, so we're going to have to find that on our own. It's at 95% confidence level, which means that we're going to type in 0.975 for the inverse t function. We also know that our sample size is 250, so our degree of freedom for this will be 249. Let's type that in our calculator. So we're going to go to Menu, Statistics, Distributions, and we're going to go to inverse t. Our area was 97.5% for 95% confidence level, and then our degree of freedom will be 249 for our sample size of 250. And we're going to use this t star value, 1.96954. And then we can fill in the rest of the values. And that's how we find the confidence interval for sample means for statistics. Now let's try it with data. So sometimes you might be given a lot of data like this, and you're going to have to input it to get the statistics and get the confidence interval. But we could do this all in one step as well. So let's first go to our calculator and type the data in. Since we're working with the raw data, we're going to have to put this into a spreadsheet. You can go to the Home button, select the spreadsheet. You're going to want to give it a variable name. Now this one was the number of toilet papers required to absorb 1/4 of a cup of water. So we just put toilet paper. And then you're going to want to enter in the data. When you're finished entering the data, you're going to go to Menu, Statistics. We're going to go straight to confidence intervals. And this is a one sample t interval for means. The exact same thing as the previous problem, except this time we're working with the raw data. So we're going to go to t interval. And then this time we're going to put data input method is data. The list you could keep as column A, but I'm going to choose toilet paper so I make sure I don't mess up. And you're going to want to know your confidence level. If you look carefully at the last problem, I talked about 99% confidence. So if you scroll up, you'll get all the information you need. Your lower bound for your confidence interval, your upper bound, even your sample mean, your margin of error, and your degree of freedom, and your sample standard deviation. So you can copy all of that down. There's another way to access this if you go to the calculator app right after you've done the confidence interval. So you go to the Home button, you can go to the calculator. If you click this button var right here, you'll notice that it gives you all this stuff. This is all the calculations you just used. So if you click on this one, stat.results, and then you hit enter, it will repeat everything in a nice format where you can see all the information you want to look at. I hope you found this video lesson helpful, and I'll see you guys next time.